Jeff, when do you think barcodes were invented?
I believe barcodes were invented in about 1960 or 65, and the first barcoded uh, stick of, I think it was Wrigley's Juicy Fruit gum, went through a scanner in about 1972. I think that's right. I should know this. I
And
spent years messing with barcodes.
that's that's exactly why I asked you that question. And now I want juicy fruit. This is not a podcast about juicy fruit.
Oh,
Listeners, welcome to How It's Met, the podcast where we chat with founders, physicians, investors, inventors, health journalists, and your occasional Olympic hopeful. My name's Jeff, and today we have with us the inimitable Geof Auchinleck, co-founder, CEO, and chairman of Claris Healthcare. Jeff, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Thanks, Jeff. It's nice to have the same name. Makes it easy to remember. So,
Frankly, I think that you're the more efficient one because you've got one F instead of the two. I think that extra F is a bit too much sometimes.
it's redundant. Yes, there you are.
It is redundant. It is definitely redundant. So let's jump right into things. Jeff, you graduated from UBC and you decided to, as one does, look in the newspaper for a job and found one as a biomedical engineer. So back when you graduated, what on earth was the role of a biomedical engineer for a hospital?
I had absolutely no idea when I applied for the job. The backstory here is that the love of my life had just started medical school, and I thought, "Whoa, biomedical engineering at a hospital! Ah, then I could be working in the same place there. That would be cool." So I applied for the job. They were looking for a PhD in biomedical and clinical engineering. Now, I had a newly minted bachelor's degree in engineering physics, so close enough. I mean, why not? Anyway, so I applied for the job, and much to my shock and surprise, I got on extremely well with Dr. Jim McEwen, who's head of the biomedical engineering department at VJH at that time, and he gave me the opportunity to jump into medical device field. The role originally was safety testing and qualification of medical devices for use in the hospital. So basically, anything that had an electrical cord on it, we had to safety test it to make sure it was safe to use in the hospital and was properly grounded and all that kind of thing. And to be perfectly honest, it was really kind of boring. However,
I won't tell.
I mean, but something really interesting happened. I mean, as a new minted grad from engineering, you think you know it all, and we're looking around at the technology in hospitals, and that was such a tremendously interesting time to be in medical technology because these new computerized things were starting to appear in the operating rooms and physicians' offices, stuff. They had these glowing red LED numbers, and for the first time, I guess, in history, physicians had no idea how this stuff worked. It was a totally new field of science. When you're talking about a retractor for surgery, it's basically a bent piece of metal and, they get it. I mean, they can look at it and they know how that works. But when it's got glowing numbers on it and little beeps and whirs, it's like, I'm not really sure what's going on in there. So for the first time, engineers were sort of welcomed into that world and, you know, acknowledged that we had something to contribute to help the medical profession do its job. And for a newly graduated engineer, it was like walking into a candy store because you're looking around and saying, well, I could put a computer in that and I could do an electronic sensor there and I could do all this high tech stuff and make this all better. And it was just so many opportunities. So wonderful time here.
Mhm. And I mean, to foreshadow things a little bit, not everything has an electrical cord when it comes to newly invented biomedical devices anymore. So that's something that's changed in the past little while. But to kind of jump back to your story, how has the definition of biomedical engineering in your perception changed since you first took that first job?
Well, yeah, it's really interesting because I remember when I first started telling people I was in biomedical engineering, they immediately thought of prosthetics.
Huh.
Making artificial limbs and things was biomedical engineering. Going, well, I guess you watched, the Bionic Man or something. You figured that's where they came from. And I was trying to explain to them that it was, making sure technology was appropriate for use in the hospital, which I would really now call clinical engineering. And then biomedical engineering, now has all sorts of different branches to it. You can have medical device development as part of biomedical engineering. You can have tissue engineering and biological engineering. And now, of course, digital health is huge. And that's also medical engineering. So it's a broad spectrum. It's a lot broader than it appears on the surface. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. So it definitely has evolved quite a bit in, I guess, in the course of the years. And it seems like it's diverged quite a bit as well as technology has advanced in many different realms. But speaking of many different realms, you went on to I guess, invent many different things. You're known for being a serial inventor.
Mhm.
One of the first things that apparently you worked on, according to the digging that I did, was you worked on the first robot specifically designed to assist in surgery. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how you got involved from where you started?
Yeah, so this is another great story. As I mentioned, Dr. Jim McEwen, who gave me the job as clinical engineering role at VGH. And after a couple of years, as I said, I was getting a little bored. And so I went out to lunch with him and I said, I've decided to go back to university and do a PhD in applied physics. And he says, oh, well, that's great. And continuing education is really good. But, I just pulled together funding for a new project where we're going to apply automation and robotics technology to healthcare. And I thought you would probably want to lead that, but no, you should go back to university and study some more. And oh, maybe you could help me find someone else to lead this. Well, I'm going, yeah, I could feel my arm
This
being twisted up
guy.
behind my back, right? So needless to say, I stayed with Jim and they founded a company called Andronic Devices, and we launched into applying robotics and automation to healthcare. That was the mandate. And what came out of that was in March 12th, 1985, I think it was, we first used a robotic device to assist in knee surgery. It held the patient's limb in position during and under voice control, which was pretty insane at that time, and manipulated the limb during knee surgery. Now, we would love to claim that we were the first time a robot was ever used in surgery, but that happened 2 weeks before we did. Happened down in Long
Oh,
Beach, California. And but we still get a good claim out of this because down in Long Beach, California, they had used an industrial robotic arm. It's called a Puma robot arm, a very high precision arm, to position a probe in a patient's brain during surgery, which was a pretty cool application. But they beat us by 2 weeks. Otherwise, we could have said we were the first ever to use a robot in surgery. But we were 2 weeks later, but we were the first robot that was specifically designed to be a medical device, not an industrial robot that was, co-opted to hold something steady in the operating room. But yeah, it was pretty cool. And looking back on it now, we were completely out of our minds. It was, uh, you know, this big apparatus with pneumatics and hydraulics that moved the patient's leg around under voice control from the surgeon. Now, you got to remember, this is 1980, 84 or 85. 84, we
yeah.
still work on it. 85 was the first clinical use. And we were using two top of the line high-powered IBM PC computers running at 4.77 megahertz. That would be 1,000 times slower than the thing in your phone now, right? So a fraction of the computing power you have in your pocket. Yet we were doing full-on voice recognition and full-on machine control for a robot with those devices. And we used it in about 250 surgical procedures. Obviously improving it and going through various generational things. It was a
Mhm.
great idea if you wanted to employ engineers because it took two engineers in the operating room to run this thing instead of a bent piece of metal that would hold the limb perfectly fine. Thank you. But there you go.
So what was the reaction to that? If you just added more people to make sure that the I guess specific technology worked more, I guess worked as you wished it to, when there were already retractors or medical students or residents to hold the leg as you wanted to, what was the reaction to surgeons in the room?
Well, the surgeon in the room was part of the project. So, the guy who was
Ah,
responsible for using it was Dr. Brian Day, the infamous Dr. Day of Canby Surgical Center, a longtime friend. Uh, so it was fun. It was exciting. It was cool technology, but it was not practical by any stretch of the imagination. It made no sense, to be perfectly honest. In fact, we have a lovely National Geographic video of the robot being used in the hospital, and the voiceover has this one line in it, which is absolutely hilarious. Without the robot, the limb would have to be held steady for 20 minutes at a time. And going like, okay, well, if the objective is to hold something steady, what do you need a robot for? A robot's job is to move things around. And it's like, yeah, this actually never made any sense. But there you go. I mean, it was a technical achievement that I'm still incredibly proud of. I mean, we were so far ahead of ourselves, but it was not in any sense practical. And no, no practical robot came out of that kind of work until 20 or 30 years later, right? We're now seeing robots that are actually doing surgery and the like. But yeah, what we were doing was quite removed from that. But we did learn a lot about it. And again, tipping on the fact that what was really needed was something that held stuff steady during surgery. We ran out a whole range of different positioning devices, like I'll call them, that were designed to hold things steady rather than move them around. And we launched, I don't know, 3 or 4 different projects that were based on holding things, retractors and cameras and, various other instruments and things during
Mhm.
surgery. And some of those were, mildly successful.
Mhm. That makes sense. So you went on to invent multiple other medical products apart from the ones that powered Neoteric and Claris. What were your favorite other inventions?
Wow. My favorite the one that was most challenging and interesting was I invented a new type of dermatome, a device for making thin slices of skin to treat burn patients. And that got me into the burn ward, which was the most horrific thing I've ever seen in my life, and gave me a real motivation to try and do anything to reduce the suffering and kind of surgery. That was really a challenge. I mean, what constitutes sharpness? What constitutes good cutting? I mean, it's really tribology is not an easy thing. So that was fun. Um, yeah, I guess the other patent that I got 26 U.S. patents or something. Basically, one or two of which have ever made any money. The rest make great wallpaper. But the other one that I'm quite proud of was we invented a system for managing donated mother's milk in donor milk banks, and worked with a hospital in Santa Clara, California on this. And bottom line is the best possible thing for newborns is genuine mother's milk, not formula, not other stuff. And the Santa Clara Hospital had moved to a program where they asked mothers who could to donate excess milk that they kept in a milk bank, and they gave to neonates, particularly premature babies. And oddly enough, funny thing, a woman who gives birth prematurely, her milk is ideally suited for premature babies. I wonder why. I mean, evolution, maybe there's something to that, right? Anyway, they used 100% natural mother's milk, and they reduced the rate of necrotizing enterocolitis essentially to zero in the hospital. And
Wow.
this, I mean, that's as horrible disease as it sounds, for me. So one of the things is it has to be treated with all the respect of any foodstuff and fully tracked and, made sure it's handled properly and everything like that. So we did a barcode driven software package to manage that mother's milk. And we ended up donating that to hospitals in the UK and Australia as well. And quite proud of that. I thought it was a lot of fun and a really, really worthwhile. And after little babies, I like it.
You seem to be a guy that's really, really, really into barcodes. And that seems to
Yeah. Okay. So here's the reason for this. And this goes back to when we first started Neoteric, which back in 1997 was the first company that I started on my own, co-founded with a friend of mine. And we had decided that we were going to improve the safety of blood transfusions in hospitals. Now, for those who are old folks like me, you may remember that 1999 or 2000, there was a report that came out in the United States that said hundreds of thousands of people were being killed in hospitals every year due to hospital errors. We became convinced that a lot of those errors were misidentification. So, a blood sample goes down to the lab and it's assigned to the wrong patient, and therefore the wrong decisions are made, and so on and so forth. So we decided that the thing to do was to have machine readable wristbands in the hospitals and machine printed, because the standard of the industry, certainly in the National Health Service in the UK where we were working at the time, was ballpoint on a sticky label stuck on a bracelet, handwritten. And, I mean, those standards of whether it's first name last or last name first or whatever, it was just, whatever somebody wrote on there. And you're making critical healthcare delivery decisions based on information. So we became evangelists for having machine printed wristbands with machine readable codes on them. Well, of course, the easiest one to use was a barcode. So we began barcoding wristbands. And once that was in place, we were then able to do things like our blood transfusion safe track system, where we were able to scan the patient's wristband and the blood bag barcode and just make sure we had the right blood for the right patient at the right time being delivered in the right way, which obviously will help prevent accidents. So that's how we got into barcodes. And ever since then, everything needs a barcode. There we are.
that's fair enough. How many barcodes do you have at home?
Oh God, I can't even count. I mean, they're all over the place.
Like,
They're on the back of my business card. So, you know,
Fair enough. You're the
Yeah,
barcode guy.
yeah.
So, I mean, like you end up founding or you ended up producing an incredible or helping the healthcare system take incredible step forward in standardizing quality of care. Was it a smooth path or were there bumps along the way in terms of uptake?
There were a lot of frustrations along the way. You know, I'll never forget going into a hospital in I'll say northeast London. I won't name it, where we were trying to convince them to buy this patient wristbanding barcode printing thing from us that we were pricing at, I think, about £10,000 for the entire hospital and all the different admission points of the hospital. And we went to somebody called the risk manager and said, this will be safer for you. It should come out of your risk management thing. And she looked at it and said, yeah, this is a really clever idea. I can see why that would work. And she says, I've written 3 checks this morning to pay off lawsuits, essentially, that are more than that, but I have no budget for anything. It's just like, it's so frustrating.
Jeez.
It's this. You see this a lot, not just in healthcare, but everywhere that, not my job, not my problem. It's like, well, can we think a little more broadly, please? So, yeah, a lot of resistance. And I mean, one of the things in healthcare, which I always caution anyone who's trying to launch a new business and saying, "Oh, I'm going to go into healthcare." Well, it's hard, and it's hard for a darn good reason, And it's like, imagine this: you go to your doctor, and he says, "I've got this spectacular new treatment I've come up with. Would you like to be the first to have it tried out on you?" And of course, the answer is no, thanks. Come back after you've done 20,000 patients and you've seen how it goes, right? So, by the very nature of healthcare, it's conservative, it's careful, it's slow to make change and stop and check and make sure this is working. So, it's not as easy as saying, just buy this new video game, try it out. If you don't like it, chuck it. I mean, it's just not that easy. So as a result, it's a challenge to get adoption of new technologies, and if it's a radical new technology that really changes things, even more so. So that's the nature of the work, the nature of the business.
Mhm. You eventually did obviously get uptake. What in particular drove that, hockey stick? Was there a particular change in the way that you pitched, or was it just general environmental factors that helped you move the process along?
Well, we ended up getting a lot of evangelists within the healthcare space, particularly the National Health Service of the UK, who, would stand up at conferences and say, "Why aren't we doing this? There's no risk. It's common sense, and that kind of thing." Ultimately, it ended up being published as an NHS standard. That was the expectation that would be, table stakes was a machine with barcoded wristband. That's just the way things go. You just need to be convincing and take the wins where you get them and publicize those and, talk about why it's a good idea and keep working.
So you've, not to spoil the rest of the story, but you've ended up, I guess, doing more work in the healthcare space.
Mhm.
How has, oh, and Goose has crept into the picture again. How has the picture of selling to healthcare systems changed between then and now, or has it stayed the same?
I would say the caution has stayed the same, and the reluctance to be blamed, like, nobody wants to be blamed for the bad decision or the choice of a medical product that ended up causing all sorts of problems. So, there's the same cautions there. But there is certainly, over the arc of my career, the acceptance of technology in healthcare, of course, has just taken off. It's hard to imagine how low tech stuff was, in 1970s, 1980s, and how high tech it is now. I mean, everyone would be shocked and horrified if they walked into a hospital and saw 1970s technology. Just it would be like, what are you doing? It looks medieval.
Can you describe what it was like back then? Because I'm someone that was born in the N90s, so I have no perspective.
Well, back then there was basically no computers. Like, it's there may have been a hospital mainframe for some highly sophisticated record keeping of some sort, but the average physician had no contact with a computer or any computerized device. There was very little in the way of electronic sensing. I mean, I guess electrocardiogram machines and monitors were around, but it was all pretty simple stuff. No pulse oximeters, for example. That was a new thing coming along. No automatic blood pressure monitors. That was a new thing. There's just all the stuff we take for granted. I mean, you walk into a physician's office now, they have a little cart that's doing miraculous measurements on you right then and there in a matter of seconds. None of that was available. blood pressure was a little cuff and a stethoscope and, an auscultation of the rot cough sounds, and that was the only way to do it. And now, we take it for granted that, I can get all that on the air on my wrist, right? So uh, that adoption of technology across the board is uh, it's ubiquitous. It's a normal table stake.
So a little further back in this conversation, I had asked whether or not there was any pushback from the surgeons in the room. You ended up being involved in so many different projects, and then I'm assuming that not all of them were to do with Dr. Day.
No.
So, was there ever any pushback from surgeons or other stakeholders in hospitals to engineers becoming more involved in the healthcare sector?
Sure. There's always the ones who are reluctant to change and reluctant to move
Yeah.
on. But, the one of the lessons I learned about business in general very early on in my career was that, if you actually go out to people and ask them what their problems are and what they need help with, and then solve that problem, they're incredibly receptive. Right, and incredibly willing to fix it. If you come in and say, "We think you're messing it all up, and here's a better way to do it," well, you know what? Your reception isn't gonna be super positive. You know, but the biggest successes I've had in my life were not on my ideas, they were on ideas that a customer came to us and said, "You know what? If you could do this, I'd be really interested." Hey, we did it, and they were really interested, and it worked really well, so, I think I was slow to learn that, but ultimately I did learn that, identifying the customer's pain, I'll call it, the customer's need, and then fulfilling that was a route to success in terms of financial success and business success, but success in getting those technologies adopted.
And if you were to explain, I have this question that I ask everyone who comes on. If you were to explain what you do as a biomedical engineer or what you've done so far to a 5-year old, how would you explain what biomedical engineering is?
Hmm. I would say it's measuring things about the body so that you can make decisions on how to look after a patient who's
That's fair enough.
one
Yeah.
one
I
answer.
think,
There are many answers.
yeah. What are the other answers?
Helping guide people through care for themselves, so providing them with information so that they can take action after their own health. Helping design new tissues and implants and things so that we can actually repair people's bodies. Engineering involved with that, like well, a hip joint. Um, there's some answers. I could probably come up with more if you brought me another glass of scotch.
So, I mean, you've mentioned there are many different ways that biomedical engineering impacts healthcare, and you've mentioned that there are, I guess, various perceptions that people in the healthcare system had towards biomedical engineering. From your perspective, what is the role of the physician or the care team when it comes to designing a product? Is it just providing feedback, or are there more direct roles that they can take?
Identifying the problem, and yeah, I say that very advisedly because there is a risk of if you go out and talk to anything, but let's say a physician, but anyone in any profession, and say, what's your problem? Well, I need something bent this way, and it's got to be colored blue, and it should plug in like that. It's like, no, that's not what you need. What you need is you need to be holding the liver back out the way so you can see. That's the problem. Don't tell me what the solution is. Let the engineer do the solution. You help me define the problem because you know what? I have tools you don't have. I have ways of addressing this problem that you don't. So don't dictate a solution to me. Be very clear about what the problem is. And that's the role that anyone can play is to say, you know what, I cannot, expose the head of the femur well enough to do what I'm doing here. Please find a way so I can see that. I don't know, maybe it's putting a camera in there, but it's many ways that an engineer could approach that problem. So that's the big risk. And I always warn entrepreneurs not to get pulled into having a solution dictated to them. Try to cut below and find out what the actual problem is, because it may open up some really exciting opportunities.
Hmm. Hmm. So, speaking of exciting opportunities, what was the story of the transition between your work with Neoteric to co-founding Claris?
Yeah, so turns out that there's another job I'm not good at too, and that's retirement. I got fired from retirement. We built a Neoteric up for about a decade or so, and then in 2008, 2009, we got an offer to sell it to Humanetics Corporation out of Boston, which is a big blood management company, and it was a perfect fit for them. It was a great relationship. It was a good deal all around. Very happy with that. So I worked for them for a couple of years and then decided to retire because I'd done well and could take a break. Turned out I'm not good at retirement. I got pretty bored after about 6 months, and then I got fired. And everyone immediately says, "Oh, your wife fired you." No, it wasn't my wife. It was one of the guys who worked with me at Neoteric had gone to Humanetics in Boston. And after a few years, on basically January of 2012, he phoned me up and said, "I can't stand working for a big public company, so I've quit my job. So I need a new job. So you're starting a new company. So what are we doing?" And right like that, I was fired from retirement and back in the fray. And his timing was perfect because I was just sort of at that stage of going like, you can only mow the lawn so many times, right? Gotta be something more worthwhile to do. So Paul and I co-founded Claris Healthcare in 2012, and launched into it again.
So what specifically drove the story behind Claris? Because you've told me the story about the breast milk bank and also all the errors made in identifying samples or even transfusions with Neoteric. What drove the foundational idea or the solution Claris provides?
Yeah, no, that's really interesting because, having had the experience of Neoteric where we went out and threw a whole lot of things at the wall and waited until something stuck, and that ended up being blood transfusion, but that is certainly not where we started. We had no idea we were building a blood transfusion company when we started. Another story. But Claris, we said, okay, let's do this properly. Let's sit down and define what we're going to do before we start building prototypes and wasting money. So we said, okay, what is the biggest problem facing healthcare today in 2012? What's the biggest problem facing healthcare? And we very consistently got an answer from everybody that an aging population is breaking our healthcare system. And that was true 10 years ago. It's even more true today. Problem is that our healthcare system is designed around acute interventions for generally healthy younger people, where you can put them in a hospital bed, cure them, and send them home. So it's an interventional kind of approach, which is based around these very expensive facilities where you minimize the time they're in and you send them home. The trouble with an aging population is there's not acute problems that they suffer from. It's multiple chronic conditions that they will die with that need to be managed. They can't be cured. So the whole idea of taking somebody with a chronic condition, putting them in a hospital bed and leaving them there until they're cured, well, that's basically is a death sentence. And it's going to be so expensive, you're going to bankrupt the whole healthcare system. So that approach is just totally wrong. So the upshot is everyone's saying, well, we got to move care for our aging population and people with chronic conditions out of institutional setting and into the home setting. Got to, people have to stay at home and age in place and be safe and be looked after and all that, but outside of the institutional setting. So that was the challenge. So we said, okay, we're smart guys. So we went around, we interviewed a whole lot of people and said, one question: what is it that it causes you to make that terrible decision to uproot a senior from their home and put them into some kind of care or institution? And what can we do to delay that by a week, a year, a month, like, some period of time? We got two consistent answers. The first one was around medication compliance, and this stunning statistic. In the province of British Columbia, 40% of hospital admissions for people over the age of 50 are medication related. Just a crazy percentage. So we said, oh, okay, let's take a look at that. And well, we went and looked at that, and there's little companies like Philips and General Electric and big
Tiny companies.
manufacturers,
Tiny.
doing all sorts of stuff in medication compliance. They said, there's probably not much we can add there. Turns out later on that I found there was a way we can add that. But at that time, we said, not much we can do there. So we said, well, what else is there? We had this wonderful conversation with the hospitals at Victoria General, where he said, I'm at the tail end of an inexorable process for a senior living on their own. If they get in trouble, they dial 911. 911 operator, they send the paramedics. The paramedics, they scoop them up and they bring them to emergency room. Emergency room puts them in a bed, and I finally get to talk to this person. He said, I can tell you that more than 90% of the times, if I'd been monitoring this patient and seen the trend, and had been able to provide them with timely, relevant self-care information, we could have avoided all this. We didn't need to do all of this. They could have looked after themselves in their own home. So being techie guys, Paul and I whipped out our iPhones and said, FaceTime, problem solved. There you go. Just give him an iPhone, and that'll do it. And this guy said here's the aha moment. He said, yeah, my mom's 85 years old. She phones me up every time she wants to turn on the TV because she can't figure out her remote control. How do you think she's going to do with an iPhone? Now, at that time, my mom was 92 years old and phoned me up every time she wanted to turn on the TV. So I knew exactly what this guy was talking about. And I'm sitting there saying, just imagining my mom trying to figure out how to download an app on her iPhone and Bluetooth connect it to her blood pressure cuff. This isn't. So that was our aha moment. That we had to figure out a way of creating a communications channel into the homes of seniors that was accessible, engaging, and allowed them to have this open connection through which we could monitor them and we could deliver care. So we quickly prototyped something up and we took it around to a whole lot of seniors and said, what do you think of this? And unanimously they said, this is a wonderful idea. I know lots of people who need something like this, but I'm perfectly okay myself. I don't need anything like that, which is the problem that anyone trying to introduce technology to seniors gets. And I now understand that. I'm about to turn 65 in a couple of weeks, but I'm going up skiing tomorrow and I'm still going to ski like a 30-year-old because as far as I'm concerned, I still feel like a 30-year-old. So don't tell me that I'm old and that I need help and assistance and this kind of thing. So this really limits the ability to introduce healthcare technology to an aging population. They don't want to admit, I don't want to admit that I'm old and frail. So we felt that we had to do something different. So we retracted from the market and we came back with something we call Claire's Companion. Claire's Companion deals with what is now called social isolation. And what we said is this is a communications platform. It allows you to engage in Zoom calls and emails and text messages and TikTok and Facebook and all this stuff that your grandchildren are talking about that you can't figure out or isn't worth learning or so on and so forth. We can put this in your hands in a way that makes it incredibly accessible for you. What do you think of that? So now this thing sitting on your counter is not a healthcare device. It's a communications platform for staying in touch with the family and doing all the sharing photographs and doing all this kind of stuff. Oh, every so often it may stop and say, please measure your blood pressure, but that's not the main reason it's there, is it? Okay, well, you get where I'm going with this thing. Once that communication channel is open and accessible, we can use it for any number of different things, like a wide range of different, but we've got to have that channel open. So that's what we created. We've been selling that for over 10 years. Now with COVID, the very fact that that helps address social isolation has just made our sales explode. It's just a huge opportunity for us because everyone saw the picture of Granny with her hand on the glass, wanting to be in touch with her family, and now we have a way of doing there we are. That's how we got there.
So, I mean, it seems like you kind of, to some degree, incepted your way into seniors' homes and convinced them to take measure of their health without necessarily being aware of the fact or necessarily bringing to light the fact that they require help because people are proud. How did you eventually turn that into multiple different product streams?
Well, it's actually all the same product. It's just different applications of it. So, right now, I'm talking to you over a bit of software that is using a pair of wires that run out of my house and up a pole out in the street. But the telephone company doesn't care what I'm using that for. We could be having this video conversation. I'd be playing games. I can be doing any number of things. I have to have a voice call with somebody, but they don't care. And Claris doesn't care either. We're establishing this open channel of communication. Then you can use it for anything you want. It's an open platform. You can load any app in the App Store on it. You can put any document, any web link, anything you like. So you tell me how you want to use it. So as a result, we've had this thing used for in-home rehabilitation after surgery. We use it for playing bingo games. We use it for remote patient monitoring, where we're monitoring various vital signs and reporting that back to physicians. It's all exactly the same platform. Just how would you like to use it?
I guess to summarize all you've done in your wide ranging career between Claris, Neoteric, all the devices that you've worked on, whether or not they succeeded, it seems like there's a very deep humanitarian aspect to it all when it comes to wanting to solve these specific problems that the healthcare system or healthcare workers face. Is there a specific mentality that has driven you to specifically pursue this line of work, or is it just who you are?
No, well, I guess it's become who I am, but,
Hmm.
uh, well, again, Dr. Jim McEwen, who gave me the first job, he once said to me, just sort of off the cuff, I don't even think he remembers it. He said, "It's great to have a career where you can do well by doing good." And isn't that a wonderful thought that, yeah, you can have financial success and, raise a family and build a house and all that kind of thing. But at the same time, come home at night and say, I'm actually moving the world forward. I'm leaving the world in a better place than when I went in there at 9 o'clock this morning. And how many engineers get to say, that our device, our software, our product saved somebody's life today? And, I've had that happen. Had phone calls from customers who say, your blood transfusion system prevented a transfusion today because it was a mistake that would have killed the patient. Well, that's pretty damn cool. As a physician, I guess you get to do that, fairly often. You can make decisions that are really life changing. But as an engineer, not so many, right? And so it's really nice to be able to say, hey, I made a really positive impact on people's lives out there. And I think that's what drives me. In fact, I remember I always tell this tale about hiring a software engineer who had been working at Electronic Arts. And he came to us at Neoteric when, we were 6 people or something and struggling for cash and all the usual things of a startup company. And I said, why the hell would you want to come from EA, free food and soccer field out the back and, job security and playing a video game? Why the heck would you want to come to this company where maybe we won't make payroll on Friday? And he said, well, at EA, maybe I make a more realistic blood splatter in some shoot 'em up game, and here I could save somebody's life. Like, okay, well, yeah, well, needless to say, you got the job. But yeah, it's really great to look back on a career and say, I have made a positive impact on people's lives individually and collectively. I've left the world in a better place than I found it. That's really key.
Hmm. So, I mean, looking to the future, what exactly excites you most about the future of biomedical engineering? Is it more changes in the field? Is it a specific piece of technology? What excites you most?
The impact of AI is going to have on, on healthcare. There's already we're beginning to see AI moving from ain't that cute to, oh, this is actually going to be used. And we're at this really fascinating transition point where it's going to go from, being able to do cute tricks or maybe win a game of Go or something into actually being able to make positive contributions to humankind. Now, I'm not entirely sure that it's going to be entirely benign, and we're going to have to be very, very careful as we roll it out. I mean, look at all the stuff around ChatGPT, and it will tell you lies. It doesn't seem to care whether what it's saying is accurate or false information. And if you do get a false question, a false response from ChatGPT, ask it why it gave you the wrong answer, and it'll turn around and give you the right answer. It knew the right answer. And it's like, whoa, we got to put guardrails around this, right? So there's some really interesting challenges coming up. But generally speaking, I'm an optimistic person, and I think that there's going to be huge value come up application of AI.
Hmm. I mean, that in itself sounds antithetical to adoption in medicine overall, does it not? Because you've mentioned that healthcare itself is very, very conservative. And
Yeah.
to have an AI that can give you the wrong answer by choice and then give you the right answer, that seems like something that no one will, number one, want dealing with their health. But number two, no one will accept liability for us.
Well, exactly. So I didn't say it was going to be easy and I didn't say it was going to be quick. I'm just saying that in the longer term, it has the potential to have a huge and potentially positive impact on healthcare. So we'll see. And, as my elder brother says, I want to stay around a lot longer and see what happens next, So I think it's just a wonderful, time to be involved in this stuff as technology accelerates and the opportunities, blossom and branch out.
Mhm. To close off, usually I give our guests a chance to plug whatever they want to. Are there any pluggables that you'd like to plug before we end off this podcast?
Well, sure. I'll say that, if you have a family member, an elderly family member who's feeling isolated, go to clariscompanion.com and take a look at what we can do for them because we can really help in that situation. So I'll make that plug. Uh, yeah, it's great to meet you, Jeffrey, and to chat with you. It's really fun.
Thank you so much. Till next time.
You bet.